everybody, Mike Griffith here. Welcome to tonight's Ingles on the Beat segment. Really excited about tonight's show. We're going to talk a little bit about Georgia football today, Georgia football yesteryear, and we're going to be doing it with a College Football Hall of Famer. Jim Donnan joins us tonight. Coach, I really appreciate you joining us tonight. Of course, Coach Donnan does some work with our friends over with the Rivals Network, but they're letting us borrow him here tonight to take a stroll down memory lane and get a little insight into college football. Coach, how you been?
I'm doing great, Mike. I appreciate you having me on. I'm kind of like an old maid. I'm available, I'm ready to go.
Well, I certainly appreciated your help. I got to tell folks, from the time I was hired to cover Georgia, Coach Donnan was one of the first people that I reached out to. And he provided a lot of background, a lot of information. He saw a new sports writer, and he was always willing to help and coach. That meant a lot to me, and it certainly told me a lot about the kind of man that you are. And, today's game, these coaches nowadays, it's not just about football, Coach. COVID-19 has turned everybody into medical experts. We've had to figure out how to sanitize, what's safe, when kids should go home, when they're not. I guess I would just ask you, as somebody that keeps up with the Bulldogs, what are your thoughts about where college football is today, and how would you manage things if you observed some things? What would be like at the top of your priority list as a head coach right now?
Well, first of all, one of the reasons I was so interested in helping you out, I had a lot of respect for what you did at UT. I know that the coaches up there felt like you did, were the kind of guy that you could tell them something and that you would, be fair. That's all you can ask from any reporter is just, hey, you got your job and the coaches have their job. And I think that's one thing I learned after I got out of football, that I probably should have done a better job as a head coach, because you got to respect that everybody's got a job to do. And I think Kirby does a good job with that, of, articulating the program, but also respecting the fact that you guys do. As far as what's going on today, every day is a new page in the playbook, Mike, because we haven't been around this kind of situation ever in anybody's lifetime. And I think all of us are looking at what the safest out is to continue playing this great game we love. And fortunately for us here at UGA, we've got such a tremendous athletic staff of athletic trainers, Ron Corson and his staff, Dr. Sayers and his the team doctor. So I'm sure that Kirby's really, just like when I was here, I just counted on those people to help me in those kind of situations. But, you hear a lot of different models going out there, conference only, conference plus one. And I'm probably the last guy I'll probably hear on what happens, because I'm counting on guys like you on Twitter to read about it. But I do feel like, hopefully, with the NFL starting up, and we had a pretty good setback today with Major League Baseball with the Marlins situation. But the thing that worries me the most about starting up football is not the football players, but the other students who, that's their role too. The kids are going to campus just like the players are. So it worries me when you get that many people back here, what's going to happen when you got, we've been able to keep them kind of on their own routine here from what I've read about. And like you say, sanitize and do everything. So I would say, if you wanted to be on Who Wants to Be the Millionaire, you could ask you could have more than 4 answers for anything that you came up with. But certainly hopeful for it, because at my age, I'm running out of seasons, and I want to see what the Bulldogs are all about, because they got some question marks, but they got a lot of good positives too.
Yeah, that's what I said. This is really a season to be excited and nervous at the same time. And we could talk about the team all day, and we do, but I want to talk about you tonight, Coach. I mean, I learned a little bit more about you. I talked to our mutual friend, Claude Felton, and of course, Claude does such a great job. And he said, Coach Donnan was an outstanding tennis player. And I said, outstanding, or you mean good? No, he said, no, I mean outstanding. And I looked it up. You played tennis in college. I mean, Burlington, North Carolina, is that a tennis hotbed? I mean, what's the story? How are you a quarterback and a tennis player? I don't see that mix very often.
Well, fortunately for me, I went to a school that wasn't a real tennis hotbed. North Carolina was more the tennis and we were more the football at that time. And I had a background. I did win the state high school championship in North Carolina, and I was fortunate enough to win some other events. But I mean, I was like a good player. I wasn't a great player, but because NC State was a mediocre tennis situation, I didn't have to really practice a lot to be on the team. And my coach was just basically a hard ass about tennis because he didn't think that our tennis coach really was the kind of guy he wanted in the athletic department because he wouldn't give tennis scholarships, and he was against scholarships. And of course, Coach Edwards wanted guys for football. There weren't many walk-ons playing in the ACC at that time, so I enjoyed it, and I had a good career there. I had some good wins, but you know, I got to the finals of the ACC one year at number 3 singles my sophomore year, and then I played number 1 the next 2 years, and I did okay. But back then, you know, it was more a flighted type deal. You know, ones played ones, 2, and all the way down to 6. But I met a lot of good people there, Mike, that helped me in my career. And over the years, a lot of good guys in tennis, and certainly really enjoyed being part of that.
That's pretty cool. So you ended up at NC State. What other schools recruited you? I mean, I know it was a different world back then with recruiting, but were there any other schools that you considered going to?
Yeah, you know, really, I almost went and played basketball at Virginia Tech or Davidson. I wanted to play basketball. That was more my game, I thought, because we ran the single wing in high school, and even though I played quarterback 8th, 9th, and 10th grade, I didn't have a real background playing quarterback, and I felt like I wasn't going to be any kind of halfback or anything like that. So Lefty Drizel told me I could play football and basketball. My biggest problem there at Davidson, it was just so damn hard. I just didn't think I could. You know, I was a pretty good student, but I didn't really feel like I could. They were recruiting me more for football than basketball, but he told me I could play. And then Clemson wanted me to play basketball. But you know, if they'd had a 3-point shot when I was playing, I'd have broken a lot of records, Mike. I could shoot up there, but realistically, I ended up going to NC State. It was between State and Duke. Carl James recruited me hard, and my best friend Bill Gentry wanted to go to State, and he was a tight end, so we went together, kind of a package deal, and we had a good career there and won a lot of games.
Yeah, you did. You know, in fact, one of the games you won was against Georgia and Coach Dooley back in the Liberty Bowl. And I'm sure that you probably talked about this game once or twice, but I don't know the story. I mean, 14-7 doesn't sound like a whole lot of offense. What do you remember from that game? I mean, you've coached so many games, and I know you played a
Yeah.
lot, but
Well,
do you have some memories?
I
From that one?
remember at the banquet. You know, we have a banquet, both teams, and the coaches get up, and Coach Dooley gets up there, you know, in his eloquent manner. He said, "I just want to tell everybody that we've been working hard at Georgia. We've had a lot of trouble because we were in exams and we didn't get to prepare as much as we'd like to." And then our coach got up and said, "Well, you know, unfortunately, we had to take exams too." So, but it was kind of a funny deal. But I always busted Coach Dooley about that. And then, boy, they had such a great defense. Bill Stanfill and all those guys. Steve Greer, who ended up coaching for me, was a great guy, and Happy Dix, all those guys. Billy Payne was playing. But what was really down the road, so many of those guys related to me when I got the job here, and boy, a lot of self-respect there among both of us, you know, the guys that played against me, and that really helped me get a jump start here because I had a little credibility because I was replacing a guy that had played at Georgia and Ray Goff. And I know you had him on here a couple of weeks ago, and Ray did a good job of laying the groundwork for it. He left us a lot of good players, and, you know, they just things didn't work out. But we certainly used some of those guys early on that he recruited.
Yeah, I know Coach Rick got some players from you too, and we'll get to that, and we'll get to the national championship at Marshall and that big 1997 season at Georgia. But when I was going through doing the bio work, looking at where you'd been, and you go, "Oh, he coached at Florida State." Well, not the Bobby Bowden Florida State. And you go, "Well, oh, look at this. He was at Kansas State." Well, not the Snyder Kansas State. He was at Missouri. Well, I don't know who Warren. Coach, you had some stops at some places, you know, really before they took off. I mean, you really invested your time before you landed at Oklahoma. And obviously, Barry Switzer took off like a rocket ship, and you were there for it. But tell me about those years grind into the 1970s, because I don't see a lot of glory here at these early coaching stops for you.
Well, you measure success in degrees, anything you do, Mike. And Florida State, I had coached at NC State for a couple of years. I got a job there right out of college because my coach wanted to start recruiting one of the younger coaches to recruit. So, but then he up and retired in the middle of the summer, my second year. And they brought Lou Holtz in there, and Lou offered me a job. But the only reason he offered it was because the AD wanted to keep me for recruiting. And so I had met some guys at Florida State. So I went to Florida State for a couple of years. We had one great year and then one bad year. And then I went back to North Carolina and had really some ultimate recruiting success and really had won the ACC and did a lot of good things there. Got guys like Lawrence Taylor and Amos Lawrence and all those guys. I mean, we had 7 guys on our one team defense drafted, and the offense had a lot of good linemen. But setting up this deal, I got caught twice where the head coach left. Coach Dooley decided to go be the AD at the University at Virginia Tech and the head coach. And I was only 31 at the time, and I tried to get the job at Carolina, but I didn't get it. I was too young in their mind. And but we let them some good players, and Dick Crum did well there. But I just Jim, when they told me I was too young, I said, "Look, I'm going to go somewhere." Jim Dickey was on our staff, and he'd just gotten a job at Kansas State, and they'd lost 20 straight games, Mike, in the Big 8. Yeah. And I told Jim, I said, "I'll come out there and run the offense, but the only thing I'm going to request is I want to be the highest paid guy in the Big 8." I said, "If I'm not that, I'm going to go take a job at University of Florida where I'd recruited pretty well, and Doug Dickey offered me a job." So I got a big jump in pay. I was married, had two young girls, and just getting ready to have a little boy. And so we jumped up and made some pretty good money, but we were getting our ass beat too. And but the first year we won 4 Big 8 games, and the last game we beat Kansas, our big rival, and they left the scoreboard on for 2 weeks after we beat them. So we did okay there at Kansas State, but we were building and rebuilding there, and then we'd had some success. So Warren Powers offered me a job at Missouri, and we did pretty well there for 3 years. But the 4th year wasn't that great, and they hired Woody Woodenhofer to take Warren's place. Woody. And so the thing that helped me was that that we'd beaten Oklahoma twice, and Barry wanted to start throwing the ball a little more, so he offered me the job to be the coordinator. But I never will forget Woody in his press conference when he took the job. He'd been coaching with the Steelers, and he said, "We'll be ready 11 Sundays a year." And I said, "Hey, Woody, we're going to play on Saturday," But so I was on some back roads there, But I'm going to tell you, that helps you as a coach when you've been on the back roads instead of super highways and have to scratch and pull for players. It helps you be a better recruiter and a better evaluator of talent, and maybe looking at some guys, Mike, that you probably might not look at these bigger schools. And it helped me out a lot when I went to Marshall, because we had to find a way to get some players that, these big schools were after.
Now, before we get to Marshall, I want to get a flavor. I want to get a taste of Oklahoma. I mean, I think everybody remembers those Barry Switzer Oklahoma teams. They were so fantastic. They were so dominant. Nebraska, you dominated Nebraska and Tom Osborne. Those teams were, they were it, Coach. I mean, when you thought about, high profile, high caliber talent, Oklahoma was the program, I think. And I was in high school. I gravitated watching Oklahoma. Was it just as dynamic inside that program as it looked outside that program?
It really was special. You just have that history there with Bud Wilkinson doing so well, in the 50s. And then Barry took over for Coach Fairbanks. But really, they had a little bit of a downward trend there in the early 80s where Nebraska started getting it going. And the main reason they did it, Mike, was they had a strength program. They're probably the first team to do that. and Oklahoma just couldn't outrun them anymore. They couldn't. They were getting beat at the line of scrimmage. So Barry decided he wanted to go more to maybe a little bit more throwing game, and we had Troy Aikman, and Troy breaks his leg the fourth game. And so we had to go back to the wishbone, and our defense was just lights out. We had Bosworth, we had Tony Casillas at nose guard, Ricky Dixon at free safety. That's three guys that are in the College Football Hall of Fame on defense. And then Keith Jackson, who's in the Hall of Fame on offense at tight end. And just an unbelievable amount of backs. Everybody sees Spencer Tillman on TV now. He was a great back for us. But as far as just a quick answer there about Barry, just an unbelievably genuine guy who loved his players, was loyal to his coaches, and he lets you coach. I mean, he told me when I got in there, he said, "I'm going to be the head coach, but you're going to be the head coach of the offense. Gary Gibbs is the defense head coach, and I'm going to go get the players, and you coach them up."
Well, you'd invested like look over 20 years as an assistant coach before you got your shot at Marshall, and of course Marshall has quite a history, and you were able to win a national championship there. And I remember Greg Atkins is a guy that I got to know really well at Tennessee that played for you, and I believe also coached with you at Georgia for a while. And I remember Greg telling me about those Marshall programs. I mean, that was, as much as there was a tradition, coach, that was you kind of doing it your way. And what were some of the things that you wanted to bring to Marshall? What enabled Marshall to win that national championship when you look back at what was it, 92, I believe?
Right. So, everybody knows about the plane crash. I mean, the movie We Are Marshall, but you really don't know about the community itself, Mike, because so many of those people there were just involved in that crash because either family or friends or whatever it might be, and they just got bounced around there, emotionally for so long, and the team was so bad that they finally started getting it going, and George Chomp started getting some players there. And I just felt like it was first of all, I was kind of selfish because my son was in high school playing football, and I really had a couple opportunities, but I didn't want to go be a head coach and miss seeing him play. So I ended up taking a Marshall job there after Switzer got out, and I coached 1 year with Coach Gibbs. But the main thing was being able to go in there and lay the blueprint. We built our own stadium. It was getting ready to be built. Built our own facilities building, set up all kind of TV packages. We were able to be one of the most, because we basically gave it away, but we needed that kind of publicity. So we were up and down the East Coast and the South with our Saturday night games everywhere. So it was just a very rewarding experience, and we had some big wins and a couple tough losses there in the championship game. But and after I left, they didn't lose a game for a year and a half with some of the players we left them to, not because of me, but our coaches and recruiters. And we had, of our original staff of 6 guys and a couple graduate assistants, 5 of them became head coaches. So Switzer told me when I got the job, he said, "Look, don't hire a bunch of your friends, hire a bunch of young guys that are going to stay with you, teach them to coach the way you want, and then it'll work out." And it certainly did.
One of the guys you recruited, I actually covered a little bit right out of Knoxville there, Chad Pennington. And Chad didn't look anything like the Chad that we saw in the NFL. And obviously, Coach, you had a reputation as a great recruiter. What did you see in Pennington? Because I always wondered, man, how did he go from that guy I saw at Webb High School into this NFL quarterback?
Well, he was kind of a gangly guy, and he was a very young guy in his senior year. But we had a guy there in town that was related to him, and we brought him up to our camp his sophomore year, and you could see he had the arm, not a Tommy gun arm, but he had a good arm, and he had good accuracy. But just the way he carried himself, the guy ended up being a Rhodes Scholar. He's such a outstanding individual, and that's what you got to do as your quarterback. You got to have a guy that's a leader. And I just sold him on the fact that you could come in here, and I said the main thing you got to remember is after everybody starts getting on you, we wanted you for a long time before they did, and that's what we tried to hold on to. And Chad just started as a true freshman for me, and then the next year when Pruitt came in there, he held him out that year so he could play 3 years because they were going Division I. But still talk to Chad a lot. He's got a son that's a sophomore in high school that's going to be a good quarterback up there in Lexington, and probably going to be recruited pretty highly.
Yeah, if he's anything like his daddy will, and as you said, Chad's a first class individual as well. The Georgia job comes along, and everybody knows the Glenn Mason story. Everybody. So what are you thinking when you get the call from Coach Dooley, and it's like, well, after all, I mean, and of all the jobs, Georgia, because things were going great for you at Marshall. I mean, that could have been a lifetime job for you, easy. Obviously, just the chance for a bigger program, bigger job.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this, and I've told Kirby. I mean, everybody knows Georgia's a premier job that you'd have to be really check your whole card if you turned it down. And but like I said, we had everything rolling up there, and I had never made a move completely because of money, but they had done a lot of things for me financially up there and helped my coaches out. And the next year they were 15-0, and then the next year won like 9. They had Randy Moss coming in, all these guys. But as far as I don't want to keep the fans talking about myself here, but my wife called me. I was over at the office because I was picking up some. She wanted me to hide some of the presents for my grandkids over at the office because they come in there and start trying to open up things. So I went over there to get them, and the day before Coach Dooley the week before Coach Dooley had called me and said that he was going to hire Mason and all that. And I said, well, stay in touch, And of course, I had coached with Coach Dooley's brother at North Carolina. So I had a little bit of existing relationship with him. And so she calls me over there. We didn't have cell phones up there at Marshall at that time, and said, Coach Dooley's trying to get a hold of you. Wonder what he wants. And I said, well, I guarantee he's not calling to wish me a happy Merry Christmas. So something's wrong here. So I said, did you get his number? And he said, no. It said, call him when you get back. So I drove over there. I must have broken every speed record driving out. That's about 4 miles from my house. And I went in there, and he just said, hey, Coach Mason's had a change of heart. I'd like to offer you the job. I didn't talk contract, anything. I just said, let's go. And so he said, we're going to, we'll have a press conference tomorrow, and then the rest is history.
Yeah, it is. And like I said, 96, obviously transition year, but 97, you win SEC Coach of the Year. I mean, obviously you had a national title behind you. You had all these great years in assistance. You knew what a championship program looked like. How close do you think Georgia was in 97? Because I remember that you played Wisconsin, and I'm not sure if that was Dane's Heisman Trophy year, but that was a very good Barry Alvarez team. And you guys, you beat Florida, and you beat them. And like I said, you win SEC Coach of the Year. And I'm thinking to myself, I think that was my last year covering Alabama. I'm thinking maybe Georgia might be on the verge of being the beast of the East there.
Yeah, we were close. I mean, the first year, and I've said this before, the first year I spent way too much time trying to raise money and meeting Bulldog clubs and all that, and didn't get to know my team like I've always been. That's part of my deal, is knowing how to motivate players and what makes them tick. And we made some mistakes at our first year as far as player selection, game management, everything. I mean, we lost some games we could have won. We got some bad breaks too, but the next year, we had one bad game against Tennessee. I mean, Peyton just lit us up, but and then Auburn, we were a little cocky after beating Florida, and Auburn beat us, in a back and forth game here. But I felt like we were close. But the biggest problem when I got here, we got put on probation, and our numbers were down a little bit, and we didn't have a lot of depth. And the other thing was, Florida and Tennessee were at their zenith. I mean, both of them won the national. Florida won it in 96. Tennessee won it in 98. And, it's hard to rebuild when you're trying to catch up with them. And deep down, that's what was what ended up. We didn't beat our rivals big enough. And Florida State was our third rival as far as recruiting, and they won a national championship too. So, and of course, Tech was really rolling too. Coach O'Leary had it going, and we had a couple bad breaks in a couple games against them. But the main thing is we won, and we were in the top 15. But that's not what you're supposed to do at Georgia. You got to get in the top 10, and that's what Kirby's doing now, and real proud of him.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's tough. I was covering that Tennessee team. You talk about talent. I mean, they were loaded, and facilities. I mean, that indoor facility at Tennessee was getting guys from all over the country. But didn't you hire Rodney Garner from them? Because when Rodney Garner left Tennessee, the balance of, I mean, Tennessee, they were winning with Georgia guys. They were getting guys like Colsey Coleman, Jamal Lewis. Rodney Garner came to Georgia, coach. That
Yeah,
seemed to be a little bit of a power shift.
Rodney was a really good recruiter, still is, and good coach too. Good on the field coach. Uh, and the one year they got Coleman and Jamal Lewis and Deion Grant from the state of Georgia. I never forget though the Augusta Chronicle the day before the national signing date said Georgia's going on probation. And we
Oh,
weren't.
okay.
We
All right.
probably wouldn't have gotten them anyhow, but.
It didn't
After
help.
that, I tried to hire Rodney the first year, and then the second year we got him, and he did a good job for us and did a good job for Coach Rick. But let me tell you something. You can take about anybody, and this is nothing about Rodney. You can take anybody if they can meet people and deal with coaches and are the kind of people that are credible. You can recruit for Georgia. If you can't recruit for Georgia, you probably need to go somewhere else and take another job as something else, because you got a lot of inherent strengths here with this program, because most kids in this state grow up wanting to go here.
Yeah, you're pretty hard on yourself with your record, coach, and Coach Goff was the same way. I look at these Hall of Fame coach with 101 and 40 as a coach, and you're on here talking about yourself like you're 500. But you can't deny this: you were 15 and 4 in the playoffs, 4 and 0 in bowl games, and I've always looked at bowl games, excuse me, as a measure for a coach, because I've talked to enough coaches that have said that bowl season is its own animal. It's not the regular season. It's not the next season. There are so many guys with so many things on their mind. When a team is successful in a bowl as consistently as you were, that shows me focus. And I guess I would ask you about your playoff and bowl coaching mentality, because that's a different mentality, a different type of success than you have in the regular season.
Yeah, we went to 3 straight Orange Bowls at OU, and Coach Switzer always said, "Hey, the first thing, the goal in any bowl game is to win it, but the second thing is have a good time and make sure your players aren't worked too hard, and you spend all your times." I know Bo Schembechler came because they had such a terrible record in bowl games, and they came down and talked to Switzer about our schedule and everything. And Switzer just told him straight out. He said, "Hey, Bo, you kicking your kids' ass so hard in practice they can't play in the game." And Bo listened to him a little bit, and they came back and did it. But with the playoffs, though, Mike, you play so many games that you got to cut back during the last 4 or 5 games and maybe not go quite as hard, and make sure that you understand that these kids are just hard to come back every week like that, week to week. So we always tried to kind of taper down at the end of the year, but we didn't play as many big bowl games here at Georgia as maybe they're playing now, but we played some good teams. Wisconsin was good, Virginia was really on fire, and then of course we played Drew Brees. And I've always said in that game started at 11, but our players didn't think it started to 12:30 because we were so far behind. We came back, and that was a good win for us. But I wouldn't trade any of my time for Georgia. It spoiled me, and after I got out of coaching, I just felt like it'd be hard for me to go anywhere else, because you've been to the top of the mountain, so to speak, and had a bad taste in my mouth because some of the things that I was told and some of the jobs I turned down.
Well, I was going to say you had some opportunities. I remember North Carolina and Oklahoma, and you had these opportunities to go other places. You stuck with Georgia. I mean, obviously, '97 was a great year. '98 it felt, but you stick with Georgia, and then a year later, you get let go. And from what I understand, and I have talked to people about this, coach, not Coach Dooley's wishes. The order comes from above, which I don't know if that still happens today, but just real seemed curious at the time. And how did you manage that? Because you think to yourself, man, I could have been back at Oklahoma maybe, and you stay at Georgia, and 1 year later.
You can't look back on it now and except that's part of the reason people say, how can you be so loyal to Georgia? Now, part of the deal is because it's with Kirby over there. He's one of my players. He was loyal to me. I'd do anything for Kirby. And I got so many players that busted their butt for me, and now I'm just so proud of. We got doctors out there. We had a guy the other day, I didn't even know it, Ben Lowe, who was a good player for us, just got his doctorate in education at Georgia. This is like 20 years later, but the main thing that for me though was I didn't realize that, certainly we weren't doing quite as good as we needed to, but I didn't realize I was in that kind of situation, or I would have probably made some more moves that last year as far as Redshirt and David Green. Although Corey Phillips played good, we held some guys out that probably would have helped us win a couple games. That we lost that tough game in overtime to Auburn, but the main thing is I didn't really want to take any of these jobs, but NC State was my home school, and they came after me with a lot of money. Oklahoma, John Blake just died, who took that job from Stellenberger, and that, Joe Castiglione. After John was down, he wanted me to come out there, and that's the job Bob Stoops took, and Bob ended up, boy, just great situation. And North Carolina in '97, we had just had a big year. We were building all these facilities here, and my biggest mistake on that job, I always tell a coach, don't go back and face your team before you take the job, because when I got back here, my players were waiting on me, and there's no way I could tell them that I was leaving, But a lot of times I'd say, hey, once you decide to take something, take it. And I didn't really think I was going to take North Carolina anyhow, but that's all water under the bridge. But loyalty is a two-way street, and I felt like I was loyal to Georgia. And I don't know a lot of people out there would have turned down $5 million 3 times to stay in this job, but I did, and that's the only thing I would say that I need a little credit for. We didn't leave the cupboards bare, and we did all we could, but we did some poor coaching too. So I'll take the blame for that.
Yeah, still in the Georgia community, and you did coach Kirby Smart. You think about where Kirby is now, and obviously, Ray recruited him with the relationship with the family in the first 2 years, but Kirby blossomed into an all SEC safety. And I'm looking at his stats, and I'm going to do a story about his numbers, and maybe his players need to look at his numbers, because he had better numbers than a lot of these all-star players he's got. How did Kirby evolve? Because you look at Kirby, and even at the highlights, it's not. You mentioned Deion Grant. Hey, Deion is the one end of the spectrum when you think about safeties, but Kirby just seemed like was it instinct? Was it studying? What do you remember about Kirby as a player?
Well, he's a coach's son. He grew up around football. He knew what it take to be a player. He was a self-made player in high school, and he got better in college. And he was very, as you mentioned, very smart. And Joe Kynes was our defensive coordinator, and Joe ran some things where he had to make checks back there, and Kirby was great at doing that. And the players looked up to him. I mean, he was a team captain, and he knew what it took to win. And he was like all of us. We wanted to beat Florida. We wanted to beat Tennessee, and we finally beat them, but we didn't do enough of it. But the main thing that I felt like that he's got going for him coming back here is he knows what it's like to be a Georgia Bulldog, and Mary Beth does. And it's just easy to sell that. And he went out and learned his trade with some really good coaches. And the one thing I will say, I got Kirby started. He got cut there by the Indianapolis Colts, and we kind of configured a job there so he could help us his first year and come back. And we had Mike Bobo and Kirby Smart and several other guys that Jones, who coaching over there, Travis Jones coaching with the Falcons now. These guys were GAs in the assistants force, and then my son Todd was a GA too. So I mean, we had some really good GAs there at that time.
Yeah, was Kirby a natural? I mean, obviously the fans. I mean, we see the Kirby now, and what was the Kirby then like? Is when Kirby goes off and gets excited? Is he showing us a little bit of how he was then, like after the Auburn game, I guess, this year? I mean, was he that kind of guy?
Well, he's like any of us, he's an emotional guy, and he enjoyed winning and took it tough when we were losing. But, he's a good athlete. I think sometimes because he doesn't have the overwhelming speed, people say, well, but he had good quickness and good instinct, good ball skills. I mean, he had really good hands. And he's a pretty good tackler. He wasn't an overall knock him in the dirt type tackler, but he could get you down. And but his leadership was outstanding. And one thing I would say about any coach taking a job, it's kind of like a divorce. You're taking over somebody else's kids or somebody else's players, and boy, it's tough for them to buy in early on. I mean, you gotta. But he and Mike Bobo provided a lot of leadership to that team because they were coaches' sons, and they really helped me make this transition because, I mean, there's nothing you can do about it when the coach is gone. You got to make the best of it. And like I said, the first year we didn't do a good enough job of relating to the players, but I think Kirby had some of the same kind of situation his first year. I mean, there's a transition from Coach Rick, and Kirby did a good job, but lost a couple games they could have won. And then from then on, it's been Katie bar the door. I mean, people want to win the national championship, but I guarantee you I wouldn't be sitting here right now if my last 3 years I was 12-0 against those 4 rivals like he is.
All right, last question, because I kept you longer than I told you I would. I apologize, but the stories
Hey,
have
I
been
don't
good.
worry. I mean, I got plenty of time, Mike. But I don't want to keep going too long because I'm going to run out of things to say. But I would ask you to make sure to tell your people there that with this thing coming up here with the fans in the stands, what's going to happen, I hope that they'll consider watching what we call the Georgia Watch Along Party, where myself and a couple guys right here from my basement, we watched the game and commented on UGA Sports Live on YouTube, and you can sync it in with your game and delay it for 15 seconds, and it's just like you're watching it on TV. You watch the game on TV, but listen to us on YouTube, and I guarantee you, I know a little bit more about some of these teams and some of these yahoos. So we
Some of
enjoy
them
it.
commentators.
So
No
I
doubt.
hope they'll consider watching it because this year you're gonna probably have to watch a lot of them because I mean I don't know what kind of fan situations. That's my only plug tonight. But
That's good. You're entitled to one free plug. You used it up. Now you got to tell me the steamroller story. Is this urban legend, or did you really bring a steamroller to a Georgia football practice?
that goes in fact with what happened with us at between the first year and the second year because we're trying to get over the hump. You know what I mean? I'm talking to our players about every kind of motivational factor I can because, and realistically, Mike, there's not a whole lot you can do, but I kept talking to them about, hey, we're either going to be the steamroller or the pavement. It's time for us. It's showtime. And we won early on. We beat South Carolina, but we're playing Mississippi State and Jackie Sherrill. They got that defense that Joe Lee Dunn's running all that different kind of defense and looks. And, we're all worried about it. And so on Thursday, right before Thursday's practice, I went over to from Bud Smear over to a training table over there at to eat lunch. And they were doing the fans can relate to it because the parking lot where the baseball field is there between where the tennis courts are, we used to have a dorm over there, and they were repaving it. And this guy was on the steamroller. And I said, look, about 3:15 today, could you drive that thing up there to that field right up there and showed him that little hill and just park it there and show me how to drive it. I want to drive it about 30 yards and I'm not going to tear anything down. And fortunately for me, he was a Georgia fan. He said, well, Coach, what do you want to do? And I explained to him, and I've been telling my players, we're either going to be the steamroller or the pavement. He said, that'll be good. So I told the coaches when I got back, I said, I know this is kind of hokey, but I'm going to drive that damn steamroller into practice. And I want you during stretch to turn all the players towards Lumpkin Street where they got their back to me. And I'm going to drive it in, and then I'm going to stand up and blow the whistle and let them see me. And I really didn't know how they were going to react. I mean, you never know players. I've had a lot of things fizzle out on me. But I got that. The guy showed me how to run the gears and everything, and I was rolling in there about 10 miles an hour, and he was off of it, but I knew where the brake was. And I got almost to where they were stretching, and nobody could see me. Some of the coaches were looking at me. And I stood up and blew the whistle, and you've never seen guys react and turn around. They knew the old coach felt like we were ready to be the steamrollers. And we beat those guys 47-0 that day. next couple of days. And it was one of the best things I ever did just for morale. And I'll take a little credit for that. But I enjoyed driving that damn steamroller. I can tell you that.
I'm sure the fans enjoy that memory too, Coach. Hey, I really appreciate you joining us tonight, and I appreciate the work you do. Like I said, appreciate Roddy letting you come over from Rivals to join us on DawgNation, and really, really wonderful visiting with you tonight, Coach. And thanks for all your help again. You've really been
I'm
a great
glad to help
to
you. And I tell you got some good people over there with Mike Carvel, and always liked him. Boy, he looks svelte. He's been out there working out and doing everything physically fit. I didn't even recognize him, but just for the fans out there, I think it's great that you have this input every week and relate to the fans. And the Georgia people love to know what's going on, and you guys do a great job of keeping them posted.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Coach. Thanks for joining us. Coach Jim Donnan, College Football Hall of Fame coach, a pretty good tennis player in his day, and some great stories tonight. And, Michael Carvel back there in the studio, I got to tell you, Michael, Coach Donnan opened the show up talking about the things that were going on in today's world, the challenges that we face, the COVID-19 just not going away. And yet the people on the front lines keep pushing, and certainly our sponsors at Ingles, they've been there all the way through it, serving us. And I want to take this moment and play this commercial and pay a little respect to the folks at Ingles that are serving out there on the front line, making things a little easier for us.
It's in our hearts to feel for you. There's been ups and downs, turnarounds, good days and some bad, but we stand together for worse and for better. We'll always have your back with open arms, heart to heart, hand in hand, community strong.
Welcome back. Mike Griffith here on the Ingles on the Beat segment. I hope you enjoyed having Coach Donnan on there. And like I said, from the time I moved to Athens, Coach Donnan was a guy I could pick up the phone and give him a call and say, hey, Coach, what about this or what about that? And he provided me with some insight and some background, knew that I was the new guy in town. And it is an industry. And, you do hear things. And Coach Donnan knows Greg Adkins, and Greg was a guy that I worked with at Tennessee. And word gets around and you build a reputation. I've been very fortunate to work with a lot of great coaches. And even though I didn't get to cover Georgia when Coach Donnan was here, I still knew of him covering Tennessee and covering Alabama and Auburn. Certainly you think about Jim Donnan and what a competitive coach that he was, and how close was he in 1997? How close were those Georgia Bulldogs? And that's the difference when you think about when you play teams and how good are they then. And let me tell you, that Florida team with Steve Spurrier, I watched Tennessee struggle with them when Tennessee had arguably better talent. And then once Tennessee finally passed by Florida, they get tripped up by Georgia. I believe Donnan got him once. I know Mark Richt really put up the brick wall there when Phillip thought he was going to. This is a tough league. There's nothing like the SEC. I know it doesn't make it any easier to go down when you don't win those titles, but you just have to understand that everybody's trying really hard and putting everything into it. And that's why when you've got a window, like I think Georgia has right now, look, 2017 hurts bad. Georgia was the best team in the country. 2018, I think they got ripped off. I think they should have been in the playoff. Last year, I thought Kirby and his team did an incredible job just making it to the Sugar Bowl and winning 12 games. I don't believe that team was better than the 2018 team, and yet they win the Sugar Bowl and 2018 doesn't because of locker room and things like that. And you heard Coach Donnan, and I thought he was very informative, and it's refreshing when you get a coach like that, and he just kind of tells you how it was, doesn't pull any punches, and he'll tell you straight up, hey, this happened, that happened. Yeah, he'll always look back. Maybe he should have left and gone back to, but he couldn't, and he tells you that. He loves Georgia, and he's still here in the Georgia community. So I got a lot of respect for Jim Donnan, and I hope you all enjoyed that interview. And I want to look at the comments and see if you all have any comments or thoughts or questions. I'll be more than happy to answer them as best as I can. I did a story tonight, kind of just like where things are right now. And in full transparency, I reached out to Greg McGarity. And Greg is a very transparent, very forward athletic director. And, he's very helpful. He'll answer your questions. But when I say to Greg, what's going to happen now with this baseball? We all saw what happened with the Miami Marlins. Or I said, hey, Greg, I've got a source telling me that that George is looking at the 20 and 25% attendance model, and Greg McGarrett, who says, listen, we don't have those answers yet, Mike, and I don't know, if that story is such a good idea, yeah, I get it, Greg. We don't have the answers, but we got to tell people what we know. And part of the job is speculating, because we're all wondering, and we're trying to keep the information straight. There's so much, and it can get so confusing that it can feel overwhelming. And when you feel overwhelmed with information, it can be kind of depressing. And I feel like a lot of football fans are kind of getting a little depressed, because there's just so much information, so many different meetings, and this group's meeting and saying that, and there's this league schedule, and it seems very confusing. And I say that because that's how I feel sometimes. And I'm thinking, my goodness, I do this for a living, and I've done it for 30 years, and it's confusing to me. So let me go ahead and write this story and try and answer the questions with where I think things are right now. The good news is, I think before the end of this week, there's going to be some clarity. And some really good news, next Monday night, I'm going to have Bill Hancock on this show. And as you know, Bill is in charge of the college football playoff. So we're going to have some very good background and information coming from Bill Hancock next Monday night. But where are things right now? So the first question everybody wants to know, are they going to play football? Well, right now, football is on. But do pay attention to how Major League Baseball manages this crisis. They've already canceled the games that the Marlins were supposed to play in tonight, and that the Phillies were supposed to play in. The Phillies were the team playing the Marlins when we learned that the Marlins had this coronavirus outbreak. So let's see how baseball manages this. Baseball hasn't canceled the season. We all knew that there would be some positive COVID-19 tests. And you can bet that the college football commissioners know that there's going to be kids. You're not going to bat 1,000 against COVID-19. Certainly not if there's not football, because then the kids are going to be back in the communities. But right now, with them at least around other tested people, it's somewhat controllable. Now, when people come back to campus, yes, that's going to be a challenge. Absolutely. And it's going to be up to those football players to be very careful. And if they're not, then, they're going to be taken out for 10 or 14 days if they test positive. So you can bet there's going to be a lot of responsibility for those players. A lot of discipline is going to be involved. But getting back to the question, are they going to play football? As of now, right now, yes. Now, you may have heard something or read something recently about the NCAA Board of Governors talking about fall championships and how they asked them to delay their decision until August 4th about fall championships. That's for FCS and for some of the non-revenue sports. They don't control the FBS. Now, that said, if they say no fall championships, then it kind of turns the optics on Power 5 conferences and saying, well, if they're not going to have championships in volleyball and in equestrian and the FCS, and the FCS may move to spring, then does that mean you don't care about the kids? Well, no, it doesn't mean that at all. It just means we're dealing with a different business model, and we're also dealing with a different sport, okay? Spring football is not without its issues and its challenges, and you're really costing a lot of kids a lot of opportunities. And ultimately, I think it should be about what's best for the players. So that's a really long way of saying right now, yes. And the Power 5 conferences will ultimately decide whether they play football, not anybody else, okay? Not this NCAA Board of Governors. They're going to base their decision based on COVID-19 trends and what they hear from health officials. That's who's going to decide it. So that was question number one. You heard some comments today from the Big 12 Commissioner, Bob Bowlesby, said, I think we've always realized and been advised that we will have disruptions during the season. In other words, they knew that there was a chance there could be some guys that tested positive. From the American Athletic Conference, Mike Oresco says it's about risk reduction, not risk elimination. So these programs know that, yes, if and when they move forward with the college football season, there will be players who test positive. And now we're all going to watch and see how baseball manages it and try and learn from it. The second thing that I think is a really big issue that we're all trying to figure out is the schedule model. So how are they going to do this? We know it's not going to be, I shouldn't say we know, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to be the schedule that you see right now. I think the model that everybody's kind of zooming in on, and when I say everybody, I mean the ACC, the Big 12, the SEC, is league games only plus one non-conference. Now, why would they do that? Well, if you go league games only, that gives the commissioner control of the schedule, so that if there are disruptions, or you hope it doesn't happen, but the need to cancel a game because of a COVID-19 outbreak, if it's just the league, then you've got the control of the league where you can reschedule. When you start playing teams from other conferences, you don't have control. You say, hey, let's say you had a non-conference game with Virginia. Hey, Virginia, we can't do it this week because of our outbreak. Can you go week 5, 6, or 7? And Virginia says, sorry, we've got an ACC game that week. But if it's SEC teams, you've got a little bit more maneuverability. We saw that the Pac-12 and the Big Ten went conference games only, largely because of that flexibility. We've already heard Greg Sankey talk about moving back the SEC championship game from its current first weekend in December, move it back a week or two. You build in some room for flexibility, maybe make up games that were postponed. So I think we're looking at a schedule of league games only, and then plus one non-conference. Now, we know at Georgia that non-conference would be Georgia Tech. Greg McGarity's told us that's the game above all the other non-conferences. That's the game they want to preserve the rivalry with Georgia Tech. The big question to me is it going to be 8 league games or 10? I think 8, just because Greg Sankey has talked about that maneuverability and flexibility. And Greg is also a guy, the trend when I've been following Greg, keeping up with all these different press conferences that the SEC commissioners had, it's like he's more of a caretaker than an innovator, and he wants to keep things as close to normal as possible. So keep your 8-game conference schedule, play one non-conference, and you build in a lot of room for flexibility. Starting date, could it be the 5th? Could it be the 12th? I know we recently saw Oklahoma moved up a non-conference game to the last week in August. Why would they do that? Well, because then they have a 2-week break before September 12th. So if they had some COVID-19 positives after that opener, they've got that 10 to 14 days to get those kids back. So I thought that was a pretty good move by Oklahoma. And that's when the season would start question. And now the one that's just so near and dear to the folks here at Georgia, the great tailgating. You see I use Sanford Stadium as my backdrop. I think this is one of the most beautiful game day environments in college football. I actually took this picture that's behind me. I lived downtown Athens my first year here. I really wanted to soak it in and really get an understanding about what Georgia football was about. So I lived in Georgia Heights, and I walked frequently on campus and downtown, trying to stay in shape, but also to take pictures like this. And just the way that sun was shining, I'm proud of myself for the picture, you can tell. The way that sun was shining on those bleachers that caught that red, I thought, look at that. Look at me. I'm artistic. Well, the truth is it's hard to take a bad picture at Sanford Stadium. So will there be fans in the stands? Well, listen, this one is impossible to predict. We've heard the folks at Texas saying 50% reduction and 50,000 people at Texas. We've heard other people think what the Falcons say, between 10 and 20,000. Jacksonville, no more than 25,000. It's really going to depend on COVID-19. Now, in the Georgia resocialization plan, remember that 250-page document? Jerry Moorhead had all those committees, and what a fine job they did, very thorough. In that resocialization package, they were not going to have tailgating. So my thought on tailgating is no until you hear otherwise. Assume no until you hear yes. Fans in the stands, that's going to be tricky. That's going to depend on COVID-19. Now, as far as the model, the players' parents, if there's fans in the stands, the players' parents will be prioritized and they will be in there. I've heard that from several sources. Obviously, the major donors, the McGill Society, people like that, they would be prioritized as well. I mean, these are the people that are donating hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars for things like West End Zone, for things like 81 million. Of course, you're going to reward those people that have donated. That's just, if you've got to find a way to prioritize. I would guess there would be some lottery system, but I don't know that. And Greg's not ready. There's several different models. The thing Greg McGarity stressed is don't confuse anyone, and I don't want to confuse any of you, but because there's so many different models and nobody truly knows. So, I'm thinking 20 to 25,000 is what I'm hearing, but don't assume anything, and try not to get too confused by all the speculation. So, taking a look here at the comments, what do we got? Keith Folds has had season tickets for 50 years, but if there's no fans, and that's the only way that the game can be played, then he's fine with that. I get that. Jacob O'Neill said, my head's blocking the picture. All right, let me get out of the way here so you can see my picture. So you can tell how proud I am in a picture. Isn't that a beautiful picture? I took that. Like I said, it's hard to take a bad picture of the stadium. Should be really interesting. Looking forward to the season. Still optimistic that it's going to happen. Want to thank my sponsor, Ingles, tonight again for enabling me to do this show. It has been so much fun to have Coach Goff on and Coach Rick on, and now Coach Donnan. Of course, Kirby made a little cameo, and we've had a lot of the ESPN personalities on: Paul Feinbaum, Cole Kubelik, Peter Burns, Chris Doring. It's been a great summer of guests, and I'm going to keep working to try and keep bringing you guests next week again. Bill Hancock, a college football playoff czar. And no, I'm not going to grill Bill over 2018. I've done enough of that on the SEC network. Paul Feinbaum asked me that every time I came on the show because he knew how upset I would get about Georgia getting left out in 2018. I still think it was wrong, but I don't put that on Bill. Bill Hancock is just an incredible executive. And the reason he's in charge is he's probably the most trustworthy figure in all of college football. Doesn't mean I like the system, but I'm going to tell you, Bill Hancock is a salt of the earth guy who I have immense respect for, and I can't wait for him to be on next week. Tomorrow, of course, Brandon Adams back, DawgNation Daily, 10 o'clock. Tomorrow night, Connor in coverage. You'll get a dose of Connor Riley tomorrow night. Wednesday night, it's Jeff Sentell. And then on Thursday, we'll be back with our Cover 4. That was missing these last couple of weeks, but Cover 4, you can bet we're going to mix it up. Everybody have a safe week. Take care of yourself. And I look forward to seeing you here again on DawgNation this week.